even and you know even we were able to afford and buy our home, and in fact, one of the things that happened in our home was we had a break-in, and by God's grace, this is going back in 2013, 2014. And by God's grace, none of us were harmed. I was at work, and Helen and the boys were here at the home. And normally, we do have, an alarm system which we alarm the ground floor because Helen and the boys sleep upstairs. And we have two French doors, one for the living room and one for the dining room. And so, they saw that the car was not there because obviously I was at work, and they thought that there's no one in the house. So they, that night, normally Helen locks the door and she sleeps with the two boys, and she locks the door and sleeps. And so that particular night, she was so tired from work, and she told Jeremy, he was not this big. He was a bit low, maybe 6, 7 years old. And she said, just lock the door, Jeremy. And so he locked the door and he went onto his bunk bed, top room and a bed, and he was asleep. And all of a sudden, Helen was woken up to this alarm, that that we have for the ground floor, and there was a noise there. And she thought, definitely this is not my husband, because when he comes, he disarms it in the morning. And so as she was woken up, she could, feel, and she heard a fellow trying to bang the bedroom door and try to get inside. And then she had call the police, and Jeremy started shouting, and then these fellows, started verbally, abusing words, and they ran off. They thought that there was no one in the house, so that they could, take something. But by God's grace, they never took anything, and they ran off. They ran off. And from that time, we were a bit afraid, and so we got. I think Brother Joe has visited my house, Brother Sister Anna. We put a shutter, domestic shutter for these backside of it, so that people, are not tempted to break in, as I don't say. So, but God kept us safe. And today, you know we have CCTV cameras in our homes, we have security systems, and we've got so many things, to describe, to protect ourselves, our homes, and the ones that we love. The technology has gone so far to describe, create impressive details of technology. We have motion detectors, we have door and window sensors, you have a very loud siren, that goes off. And to go to that extent, the police came after that. They gave all these devices for free, a panic button right beside your bed, so that when someone is trying to come and trying to intrude your privacy or to hurt you, you have this panic, little bit, which is very loud actually. The police gave a couple of them to us, and he said, just press this, and um, and uh, and then you'll be safe, and they won't come near you because it's so loud. Well, we spend large amount of money, aimed at achieving security for ourselves, for our homes, for our loved ones, our possession. And the idea is to, possibly to protect yourself and be sure that you are provided for. We have insurance policies as well. I don't think any of our parents in India had any insurance policy, but God looked after our parents, and He cared for them, out of His grace and mercy. And today, when you go to buy a house, they say you need to have a life insurance. And then, if you're suffering some kind of ill health, they said, okay, you need to take critical care insurance, and all these sorts of insurance we need to take. Uh, you know, Especially, we want to see ourselves protected, and in case of sickness, accident, thieves or catastrophic illness, incapacitated, old age, or whatever, that might overtake us, we may want to make sure that we have a security, a surety. I was thinking about this, the other day while I was, going to the Tesco, and what happened was there was this alarm on this, 4x4 that was going on so loudly. It was a posh 4x4, and yet, it was going on, and I was thinking, what's the matter? But the alarm just set off for some reason. And sometimes, they're trying the owners of that car were trying to get the security alarm, that alarm off the car, and they were trying and trying. I don't know if there was a malfunction or what, but sometimes we are controlled and dominated by trying to protect ourselves, and we make ourselves, secure. And sometimes we allow these things to dominate us. It's not easy to be a good person, to be Christ-like person, because the world and the devil are always after us. Our souls are always in danger. So this is perhaps one of the reasons why, after Jesus described the Beatitudes, the attitudes that you need to have as a good person, after describing these attitudes in Matthew chapter 6, he goes on to describe, certain actions and where we need to lay our treasures. Matthew 6, he describes 3 ongoing activities that can help safeguard our souls. They are praying, fasting, and giving. Today we are going to look in Matthew, not the first part of it, but the second part of it, where Jesus says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume, and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consume, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." There's more, but these words, are not, it's powerful words that Jesus reminds us of in another story. If you go with me to Luke chapter 12, Jesus tells a similar kind of story in Luke chapter 12. It goes on to say, "Then he told them a parable, the land of a rich man, which produced abundantly. And he thought to himself, what should I do? For I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you, and the things you have prepared, those will they who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God." Richness towards God. God has blessed us so much abundantly. For those of us who have come from different countries to England, we are so privileged to have all the latest technology, the clothes, the food, the houses, the cars we drive. God has been gracious enough to us. But sometimes, what we do, we give more focus to the blessings rather than God. We give more focus to the gifts than the giver. And we are in a serious, grave danger of that. Because if God was to take your life today, and if you have something that you cannot just part with it, then I think we are in a serious situation. Because God requires that we love him the most. Nothing should come between God and us. no form of material things. Even our children shouldn't come in between God and us, because that is how much He cares for us, and that is how much He wants of us. Nothing between God and us. Now, there is a story told about Yusuf the Terrible Turk. I don't know how many of you know about this, but he was a wrestler. And when I was a kid, my father, he used to love wrestling. He was in the army, and so he loved wrestling, and he himself was took part in a lot of boxing, within the army. And none of the three brothers don't have the kind of physique that my father had, because he was 6 foot and he was quite hefty and muscular. But I think we all took our mother's image. Uh, and so, he loved the sports, and especially he loved wrestling and boxing. And it was during those times, he used to watch this wrestling match, this freestyle WWF, the worldwide, the wrestling, and he was so much interested, and he used to watch this. And that's how I got a bit to know about this wrestling and all these the different terms they use for this wrestling. And so we have in this story, there is a story told about Yusuf the Terrible Turk. He was a wrestler who weighed about 350 pounds, and he was a European national wrestling champion. He wasn't satisfied with that. So what he did was he wanted to go and take on the US champion. And the US champion was Strangler Lewis, because with his strangle, he used to make sure that his opponents were brought down and he won. And so this Turk, Yusuf the Terrible Turk, he wanted to challenge this Strangler. And so this fight, it was set for like the European champion and for the American champion. And it so happened that this Turk didn't have a neck. You can imagine people who don't have necks. I have had come across certain patients who are big and hefty, and they didn't have necks. Basically, the cervical, area, you couldn't make out any difference between that and your shoulders. And so this Turk didn't have a neck, and so the fight began. And it so happened that because the strangler, he was known for strangling their neck, he couldn't strangle anything because this Turk didn't have a neck. And so the Turk became the world champion. He defeated this strangler. And as you know, that once you beat, you get this big belt. These wrestlers get, they win and they have this belt, world champion and universal champion and all these kind of wrestling belts. And mind you, those are not cheap belts. They're quite expensive because they're all made with gold and other things. And that is why it is so expensive. And so he had this, and now he's not only the European champion, but he's the world champion. So this Yusuf wore that belt, and he was so happy with that he has conquered the world, world of wrestling. And so he wore this belt, and he was, so proudly he was going everywhere. And he was returning home back to Turkey via a ship. And it so happened that there was a terrible shipwreck, and the ship began to sink. And Yusuf, still wearing that vest, that belt, he jumped for the lifeboat, and he was hanging on to this gold belt that he had. But what happened was he missed the boat, and he never came up and saved. He died drowning. He could not let go of that wrestling belt. Sometimes we too are like Yusuf. We are like the man in the parable that Jesus said. We are engrossed with our riches. We are engrossed with our worldly material things. Because we need to look towards heaven, because sooner or later, these things are just going to pass away. And I'm telling this because I had a friend a few weeks back. He did call me. He's a Bible worker. He did call me, and he was telling me we were, after a long time, we were speaking to each other, and he lives here, in fact, and we were speaking to each other, and then he told me, brother, did you invest anything, in stocks and in trading? I said, no. Why? I said, I don't need to make enough money, that much money, because I'm working, my wife is working, and what God has given us, that's more than enough. Because the more you earn, the more temptations, the more you want to buy, and it's just diverting. We are happy, we're content with what God has blessed us. You're saying, no, brother, I put in 200 pounds, and within a matter of 2 weeks, I earned 2,000 pounds. Just see how it worked out by just invested in this trading company. I'll send you the link. And so I said, okay, you send me the link. But I never even bothered to open the link, because I'm not, I'm very poor with all these stocks and all these things, and business, I'm totally out of it. And so it happened that this is one of the reasons why I took up this topic to speak to our church members, because this is still happening within the Adventist Church. And so he called me this week, and he was very, very upset. And I said, what happened, brother? What is the reason you are? He said, you know what? I spoke to you a few weeks about this trading company. They're a scam. I lost 12,000 pounds. I went and took a loan from the bank, and I invested in this, thinking that we can make money out of this and trading. And he lost 12,000 pounds. He's in tears. He just don't know what to do. And sometimes God teaches us a lesson. Be content with what you have. Don't go for the more. Yes, we all struggle. And sometimes we keep the blessings of God ahead of God Himself. That is wrong. God blesses us, and we need to take those blessings one day at a time, step by step. Don't go ahead of God. And, these verses which Jesus says, it's about having treasure on earth versus treasure in heaven. And I want to summarize what Jesus is saying. One of the best ways to guard our souls is to live lives of thoughtful generosity. Jesus gives us two commands about money and things. First, don't store up things selfishly here on earth. Don't accumulate these things. Second command, do store up in heaven and use your resources for God's eternal purposes. I remember once when I was having a conversation with Brother Joe, and he told me, Josh, I had so many things in my loft that I had to dispose because I'm not using it. And when I came home, I found that I have so many things that I've accumulated over these years, which I don't need. And I have a little dance room outside. And when we moved to this house, it's about 7 years now, to this other home. I left the things that I, thought I would use it occasionally in that room. But to tell you the fact, I never went to that room to use these things, because what I have in this house is too much for me, and that was an additional headache for me. So this year, we tried to get rid of so many things, and we got so much of things still there. And so maybe this coming summer, we might get rid of most of it. Why does Jesus give these commands? Lay for yourself treasures in heaven and not on earth. There are two reasons. He says, first of all, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. And secondly, he says, you can't serve two masters. It has to be God or mammon. I was wondering what the meaning of mammon was. And it says that if you have a liking for worldly things. So he pushes us to ask ourselves some questions in this statement. How might I be accumulating things here on earth inappropriately? What are the things that I might be too intensely focusing on things that are just temporal, things that I need to consider in order to invest in eternal things. There are two things that are temporal, that do not last, and things that are eternal. You know, I have two brothers, and both of them live in America. But the elder one, he's into business, and he started off as a teacher, and then went off as a computer science graduate, and he was in the computer, software, and now he has his own company, and he has about 300 people working under him. And many times he told me, Josh, we both are here. We want you to come off and settle in America. And he said, I'll give you a job. I'll give Helen a job as well. Come, you are the one that has been separated from us. And so it would be nice if you come and stay with us. And he has, every time I phone to him, he's in his company and he's saying, I have got to do this. He keeps talking, but he's also doing another job. There's not a time when he has, set himself fully to conversing to me, because he's so busy, he's engaged with his business. And sometimes he makes a lot of money. And sometimes, when you speak to him, he says, you know what, I lost $50,000. I've lost $80,000 because of this, that. And so he, I feel that he is not at peace. We are worried too much about our money, about our finances, that we want to make more and more and more, when we need to be investing in heaven. We need to be investing in the souls of heaven. And there was words written on the tombstone of one of the great men, and it was written, what I spent is gone, what I kept is lost, what I gave will be mine forever. Stocks and bonds are at the mercy of the ever-changing market. Inflation devalues currencies, houses can burn, our cars can wreck, they can be rust, get stolen, boats can sink. Even land and houses can lose its value over time. But wherever we put our wealth, there are no guarantees. No guarantees. We need to put our wealth in heaven. And there's something we need to be clear about when we look at what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6. Jesus was not prohibiting possessions. No, he doesn't condemn us for saving for the future. And he's not saying we should not enjoy the good things of life. And he's not telling that you need to give away all the good things that you have, all your wealth you need to give away. That's not what Jesus is saying. Nor is he not warning against us, to work for a living and to make money. What Jesus is saying is, you need to be sensible. None of that is really taught in the Bible, except in rare circumstances where they said, give off all their money, everything to the poor and become a beggar. No, that's what not Jesus was saying. He's saying that we need to be more careful about how we earn and how we spend our money on. There's a very good lesson from Paul as well. If you turn with me to 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verses 7 to 10. 1 Timothy chapter 6. So, and it says, 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verses 7 to 10, it says, for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing. and having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men into destruction and perdition. For the love of the money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their goodness, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. And again, Paul, he writes to Timothy in the ending verses, and he's giving his final instructions to him in chapter 6 and from 17 to 19. Command those who are rich in this present age not to be haughty, not to trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God, who gives us richly all things to enjoy. So take a note of this. God gives us riches for us to enjoy. Let them do good, that they be rich in good works, ready to give, willing to share, stirring up for themselves a good foundation for the time to come, that they may lay hold on eternal life. Very powerful words of Timothy and Paul to Timothy. So when Jesus says, don't store up earthly treasures, he's saying, be aware of thoughtless or selfish accumulation of worldly things. Be afraid of extravagant living. Don't just turn away from the needs of the poor and store up things as though that's where your security is found. J.D. Rockefeller, he said, when they asked him, how much money does it take to make a man happy, John? And he said, just a little bit more. So no matter how much money you have, just that little bit extra, is that what it takes to make you happy? I mean, that's what J.D. Rockefeller told. And what Jesus is commanding is the things we do here on earth will have eternal consequences, things whose effect will last on and on. Our primary goal is to build a character like Jesus, since that's the only thing that we're going to take with us to heaven. And when we build our character, we are going to grow in a loving relationship with Christ. And soon we're going to face God face to face. One of the earthly church fathers, priest, he describes the Christians as money changers. And he goes on to explain what he meant when he said, we are to take the capital of earth and change it into the currency of heaven. We have to take what we are earning on earth and change it into the currency of heaven. In other words, we need to invest our wealth in ways which will outlast us in God's purposes. Notice that Jesus doesn't tell that our treasures will follow us. It's just the opposite. Wherever we put our treasures, that's where our heart is going to travel. That's where our interests follow our investments. Investors watch the market very carefully. They check their stocks every day, almost 3-4 times a day. That's what they're concerned about, because that's where their heart is. That's where they have invested their money. Samuel Johnson, the 18th century English lexicographer, said, he had been, taken on a long tour through a magnificent mansion, looking at the outside of the house and the grounds. And after looking at this, Johnson said, a place like this makes it difficult for a man to die. It's true. The more we store up things on earth, the more frightening the prospect of death becomes. Because we love these things so much, we just don't want to die, because we want to enjoy these things forever and ever. That's because in death, we leave all things behind that we have valued so much in this life. So this is a very a big principle in our life. Wherever you have your treasure, there your heart will be. You either have an eternal viewpoint or an earthly focus. And Jesus tells in Matthew 6:22, the eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. 23, but if your eye is unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then darkness in you is, if the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? Jesus is using your eyes as to symbolize our perspective on life, what we focus on in this life. If our focus is knowing God and loving God's children and seeking to bring about God's purpose, then we are walking in the light. And we aren't as likely to stumble because we are seeing things the way they seem. Just as a good eye gives light and illumination to the body and enables the person to move ahead and see correctly and not stumble in darkness, so it is with a single-minded vision, ambition to serve God. We live in this world and we are focused on temporal things, things that vanish away. In fact, the Westerners are considered as people of overspenders. We spend more than what we earn. We have credit cards and we've got finances where we can invest. You can buy things without having money. We begin to get attracted to these things, and we begin to set our vision on these temporal things and lose our sight on things of eternal. My son studies in a school, and every time he goes there, he tells Daddy, this boy has got a 600-pound worth of jacket. And lately he came and told me, Dad, Joseph, my classmate, what he got for his birthday? And I said, what did he get? He said, Daddy, he got the latest iPhone from his mother, and his father gave him an Apple Watch. Apple Watch, and one gift from his father and one gift from his mother. That's an expensive one, Daddy. And what did you buy for me, Daddy? You bought me when I got in the school. You gave me just 150 pounds worth of a phone, and it's not even as fast as he can. When you, dear brothers and sisters, as parents, we need to listen to our children, but we shouldn't spoil them, because their future and their way of thinking depends on how we bring them up. Because if we are going to spoil them with buying expensive things, then their perspective of heaven is going to be lost, because their goal towards heaven is going to be lost. Yes, when they grow up and when they begin to learn these things, if they want to buy, they can buy. But as parents, we are advised even by Ellen G. White not to spoil our children with these expensive things. All I told him was, you just need a phone to let me know where you are, and I can come and get you. I don't want you to have this phone to do all these other things which your classmates are doing. You just need to have this phone for these basic things, and that's more than enough. And he doesn't bother me after that. He doesn't bother me with that. Jesus finishes his story, and he finishes teaching them on money with some very memorable words in verse 24. No one can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. You cannot serve God and mammon. Mammon is describes as the debasing influence of material things in our lives. During the first century, we had a lot of slaves there in these Western countries. And there is a difference between a slave and a servant. Servant gets paid, and a servant works only a stipulated or a contracted amount of hours. Whereas a slave, he is a slave, he has no time, 24 hours a day, he is under his master. You know, he used to work all of the years of his life. He was a slave and he was just under the master. He did whatever his master wanted, whenever, even if he was asleep at 1 o'clock in the night and if his master called, he has to be there. It is not like a servant. And so that's what Jesus is saying. You can become slaves, you know, to these things. And he says, and he warns us that we should be aware that we don't serve two masters. Either we serve God or we serve money. You can't dance to two orchestras at the same time. You can't be fully devoted and responsive to two masters. You know, before you married, gentlemen there, you might have had a few girlfriends, all of, you know, but when you marry, you are just committed to that one. You are not committed to 1 hour or 2 hours. You are committed to your spouse, 24 hours a day commitment. And that's what Jesus is saying. Choose your master today, whether it's going to be God or is it going to be wealth. Mammon doesn't just mean money, but material things. And Jesus speaks of mammon as a powerful force. And that's what Satan has brought about. This mammon is a powerful force nowadays in every Christian home. Almost personal. It's a persuasive power, a force. Almost if he's talking about the devil's chief demons actively crusading to tempt people away from God. Money, wealth, friends, it's not eternal. It exerts a powerful pull on us. And therefore, Paul said to Timothy, you know, in Timothy chapter 6, the root of all evil is money. Either we love God or we use money to serve God, or sorry, I'll put it back once again. Either we love God and we use money to serve God, or we love money and use God. Mammon is the god of our culture's chief religion. You know, countries that were under the British rule know what it is to have freedom. You know, people, men and women, children who were slaves know what it is to have freedom. And I want to urge you to meditate long and carefully on what Jesus teaches here about money. There are some Christians who say that mammon is such a powerful God that the only way to truly serve God is to renounce all material things and to commit to poverty. But Jesus doesn't say that. He says, love me more than all these things. I want you all to turn with me to a very wonderful text that I got found in the book of Proverbs chapter 30 and verses 3 to 7. Proverbs chapter 30 verses, Proverbs chapter 30 verses 7 to 9. It says, verse 7 of Proverbs 30. Two things I request of you. Deprive me not before I die. Remove falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food allotted to me. Lest I be full and deny you, and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of God. And in other translations, it says, feed me with the food that I'm content with. Don't bless me too much, God, that I'm going to forget you. And don't bless me too little, where I'm going to curse you. Just bless me with what I need. I want to close, this message today by asking you some questions, and that I came across during this week, and see where things that we're accumulating, whether we really need, or you need to ask these questions. What portion of your expenditures is aimed at seeking earthly security? When you look around your house, how much have you accumulated that you don't need? How much debt do you have? You keep buying material things and you keep piling your debt. Do you know where all your money is going? Do you know how much you're earning and your outgoing is every month? Are you able to balance that? And the little that you get, are you able to share with the poor? If you get into financial trouble, do you all of a sudden stop giving God? I know it was a difficult time for us during this pandemic. Some of them have lost jobs. Some of them were on furlough. But those are the times when, we are posed with a challenge. Do we stop giving to God? Do you serve God and use money, or do you serve money and use God? Have you ever sacrificed something eternal in order to gain something temporal? Have you ever sacrificed something temporal in order to gain something eternal? Is the world around you really better off because you've been entrusted with material blessings? Or do you just give God your spare change? Have you established a pattern of giving that will serve as a security system for your soul? Are you making significant investments in heaven? These are the questions that I'd like to pose. And you need to seek and answer these questions for yourselves. And I'd like to just end with what John Wesley, the great preacher, he gave advice on money. He says, "Dear Christians, do all the good you can by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as you shall live." Yes, we ask God this afternoon that our love will be for eternal things, and that our earthly things will be light. We ask that God would make us responsible stewards to give to others. We ask God that He would teach us to sacrifice things that are earthly in order to bring us and others to His kingdom.